There's a quiet middle in people's money story, a part no one talks about, a place where bank balances hover between $20,000 and $50,000 and the air gets strangely thin. You feel accomplished yet endangered at the same time. You can see it in people's faces when they talk about their money. They've done what most people never do. They save real money, built a safety net, created some breathing room, but this is exactly when many of them fall apart. This isn't about not knowing what to do. The people in this zone usually understand money pretty well. They've read the articles, watched the videos, they know how compound interest works. What we're watching here is something darker, a trap that closes exactly when you think you've escaped it. Let's look at what this range actually means. $20,000 puts you ahead of about 40% of American households in savings. $50,000 puts you in the top quarter. These aren't small wins in a country where half the people have less than $5,000 saved. You've separated yourself from most people through hard work and saying no to the things you've wanted. But here's where it gets interesting. This range isn't just about numbers. It's about how your brain sees those numbers. Below 20,000, most people still feel broke. Above 50,000, most people start feeling actually secure. But in between, there's this weird space where your mind can't figure out where you are. The human brain wasn't built for digital bank accounts. It was built to understand physical things you could see and touch. 10 fish versus 3 fish. Shelter versus sleeping outside. $20,000 is just a number on a screen. It doesn't take up space, doesn't have weight, but it whispers something dangerous to you. You have options. This whisper is where the self-destruction begins, not with one big stupid decision, but with a quiet shift in what feels okay to do. The person who saved their first $5,000 knows they're still in danger. Every dollar matters because being broke is still in their reality. The fear keeps them careful. But something changes in the 20 to 50 range. The panic fades. You won't be homeless if your car dies. You could survive losing your job for a couple months. The terror loosens its grip. And that's where the danger zone opens up, because your brain mistakes the absence of fear for actual wealth. This isn't logical. $25,000 isn't wealth in any real sense. It won't pay for retirement, won't create passive income, won't change your life in fundamental ways. But your emotional system doesn't deal in logic. It responds to how you feel right now. And the relief of not being broke feels a lot like being rich. Watch what happens to spending in this range. People call it lifestyle inflation, but that phase doesn't capture what's actually going on. It's not like people suddenly buy sports cars or designer bags. The self-sabotage is way more subtle than that. It shows up as a bunch of small permissions. A nicer apartment because I can afford it. A better car because the old one I had was holding me back. A vacation because I've earned this after all that saving. Each choice seems reasonable, even smart. You're not being stupid, you're being practical, taking care of yourself, living a little. This is what adults do, right? But here's what's actually happening under the surface. You're quietly changing what you think of as normal. The tight budget that got you to 20 or 30,000 suddenly feels like punishment instead of discipline. The sacrifices that used to feel worth it now just feel like suffering. There's a psychology term for this, and it's hedonic adaptation. But in this specific range, it mixes with something more dangerous, thinking you've already arrived. You've hit a number that feels like a finish line. And your brain wants to celebrate. It wants to relax, to breathe out, to finally enjoy what you built. Compare this to someone who's saved under 10,000. They know they're still building. The goal is clearly ahead of them, and there's no confusion about where they stand. Or look at someone who has 200,000 saved. They've crossed enough milestones to understand that building wealth is the actual game. Their whole identity is shifted towards being somebody who invests. But the person sitting at 35,000 is stuck in no man's land. Too much to feel desperate, too little to feel safe, just enough to feel confused about what comes next. And the confusion when it comes to money almost always turns into spending instead of saving, because spending gives you immediate relief while saving requires you to sit with uncertainty. There's another piece to this that people rarely talk about: the social stuff that kicks in at exactly this range. When you have 5,000 saved, you don't tell anyone. You're still financially invisible, still assuming everyone else is doing better than you. But somewhere in the 20 to 50 range, you might mention it, not showing off exactly, but letting it slip. Yeah, I've got some savings now, or I'm finally getting my money together. And here's where other people's reactions start messing with your head. Because to most people, having 30,000 sounds impressive. They're going to tell you so. Their praise feels good. It confirms you've done something real, but it also creates this quiet expectation that you'll start acting like somebody who's made it. This is where spending becomes about proving something. You're not just buying for yourself anymore, you're showing that you've arrived somewhere. The person with 800,000 doesn't need to prove anything. Their wealth is obvious in ways that don't require demonstration. They can drive a beater and wear old clothes, and nobody really questions them. But the person with 35,000 still looks potentially broke to everybody around them. And so the urge to show otherwise becomes almost impossible to resist. Let's break down the specific psychology below 20,000 versus inside the danger zone. It's worth looking at because it shows what changes. Below 20,000, most people live in what's called scarcity mindset. Every money decision feels huge because the cushion is so thin. This mindset has real problems. It makes you stressed, makes it hard to think long term, narrows your focus, but it has one big advantage: it keeps spending down through pure fear. The person with 12,000 saved doesn't casually drop 4,000 on a trip, not because they did the math, but because they can feel their safety disappearing with every dollar that goes out the door. They're still close enough to having nothing that they remember what it felt like. The distance from zero is short enough to still see it clearly. But by 30,000, that fear has faded enough to stop controlling your choices. You can spend 4,000 and still have 26 left. That sounds like plenty. This is where the math and your feelings completely split apart. Mathematically, going from 30 to 26,000 is a 13% drop in what you own. That's big. But emotionally, 26,000 still sounds like a lot. I know it does to me. It doesn't set off alarms that kick in at 8 or 3,000. So the spending doesn't feel dangerous, even though it really is. Now look at the psychology above 50,000. Something different happens once you cross that line. First, the number itself carries different weight. 50,000 is a round number, a real milestone. It's enough that you can imagine it actually doing something. At 25,000, you can't realistically picture that money creating income or funding a major life change. It's really too small for big moves, but too large to feel broke. But at 75 or 100,000, you start seeing real possibilities. You could invest it and get actual returns. You could use it as a down payment or something significant. You could create options. More importantly, above 50,000, you've probably learned something crucial. You've proven to yourself that you can build real money. This creates a totally different relationship with your savings. Instead of, I got lucky and saved this, it becomes, I'm someone who builds wealth. This identity shift is everything. It changes the question from, how should I spend this, to how could I use this? The person who has slowly built 150,000 has usually absorbed that they're a saver now. It becomes part of who they are. But that person in the danger zone hasn't crossed that identity line yet. They've saved enough to feel like they did something, but not enough to change how they see themselves. So they're still thinking like a spender, while sitting on enough money to make that spending feel justified. It's the worst possible combo. There's also a time factor here that matters. How long did it take you to get to 20 or 30,000? If you saved hard and got there in 2 years, you're probably still in the builder mode. The momentum carries you. the habits are fresh and strong. But if it took 6 or 8 years on and off saving to reach 25,000, you've been stuck in uncertainty the whole time. The habits never really became solid and your identity never really shifted. And now you're sitting on a number that feels both like a lot and a little, with no clear inner voice telling you what to do with it. This is where the self-sabotage becomes almost guaranteed, because humans, we can't handle uncertainty forever. We need answers, stories, clarity about what our situation means. And the easiest answer is spending. Spending gives immediate clarity. It turns abstract numbers into real experiences. It answers the question of what was the money for? Let's look at the specific excuses that come up in this zone, because they're basically the same for everyone. The first I hear a lot is, I deserve it. You've been disciplined, you've sacrificed, you've done the right things. Surely you deserve to enjoy what you've built. This sounds reasonable, but notice what it shows about how you see money. You're treating your savings as a reward for past behavior instead of a tool for future possibilities. The second common excuse that I often hear is the quality of life argument. I could keep saving, but at what cost? I'm missing out on experiences, on actually living, on being happy right now. Again, there's some truth here, in my opinion. Extreme deprivation to save money can be its own problem, but notice the fake choice hidden in this thinking. It assumes any spending is living and any saving is suffering. It doesn't consider that the best quality of life might come from building real security, from creating genuine options, from not being financially fragile. The third excuse is it won't make much of a difference. What's compound interest on 30,000 really going to do? I'd have to save for decades to get anywhere real. This one is especially nasty if we think about it, because it sounds smart about math while being completely ignorant. Yes, 30,000 alone won't fund retirement, but 30,000 plus keeping up with your contributions plus decades of growth absolutely will. The real tragedy here is using the size of the goal as a reason to quit. The mountain is too high, so why would I keep climbing? But here's what that thinking misses. The person who keeps saving from $30,000 to $50,000 has proven something crucial. They've shown that they can keep going even when the finish line is out of sight. That ability, that proven persistence is worth more than the 20,000 itself, because it's the foundation for eventually hitting 100, 200, even 500,000. The person who spends down from 35 to 22 because it won't make a difference anyway has revealed something about themselves. They quit when things get mentally difficult. And that's a recipe for staying stuck forever, because there will always be an excuse available, always a reason that sounds good enough in the moment. So how do you get past these mental blocks? How do you navigate the danger zone without destroying all of that hard work you've built? The normal advice here is to automate savings, create rules, use tricks to outsmart yourself, and those things can help a little. But they don't fix the real underlying issue, which is about who you are and what things mean, not tactics and willpower. The core question you have to answer is, what is this money actually for? Not in some vague, hopeful way, but concretely, specifically, practically. If your answer is to have, or to feel secure, or for emergencies, you're really going to struggle, because those aren't destinations, they're feelings, and feelings are always open to reinterpretation. 25,000 might feel secure today, but if security is your goal, what happens when 25,000 stops feeling like enough? You'll either save more forever, chasing a feeling that keeps moving away, or you'll spend it because the feeling never comes anyway. Both paths are completely broken. The alternative is to pick specific, concrete targets for your money, not emotional states, but actual capabilities. This money is to reach 50,000 so I can start seriously investing in index funds. This money is to reach 100,000 so I have real options in my career. Notice how this changes the psychology. You're not trying to achieve a feeling, you're trying to reach a capability threshold. And capability thresholds are objective. Either you can do something or you can't. Either you have enough to meaningfully invest or you don't. The confusion disappears. This is why people above 50,000 often find it easier to keep saving. They've entered territory where the money can actually do things. The purpose becomes obvious. But in the danger zone, you have to create that purpose yourself. You have to decide this money is the foundation, not the finish line. There's another shift that helps. Stop thinking of your savings as yours to spend. Think of it as your future self's money held in a trust. I know, this might sound like word games, but it fundamentally changes the psychological ownership. You're not denying yourself when you don't spend it. You're fulfilling a duty to someone else who happens to just be you. Your current self doesn't get to raid the trust because you feel like it. That money has a beneficiary, and that beneficiary is counting on you to protect it. This creates mental distance between what you want right now and the money you've saved. It breaks the straight line from I want something to I have money to I should buy it. You can also reframe what you're protecting yourself from. Most people in the danger zone think they're protecting themselves from missing out or looking broke or being too cheap. But what you're actually protecting yourself from is way more serious. Arriving at 45 with nothing, staying trapped in jobs you hate because you have no options, financial fragility that poisons everything else in your life. When you're honest about what's really at stake, the pull of spending becomes easier to resist. Not because you're stronger, but because you're clearer about what you're actually choosing between. It's not vacation now versus vague future security. It's temporary fun versus real freedom 10 years from now. The stakes become real in a way that changes everything. There's also something to be said for spite as motivation, actually. If you're wired in a certain way, this can work surprisingly well. Most people fail at exactly this range. They save just enough to feel comfortable, then blow it on lifestyle upgrades and an extended childhood. You could just do what everyone else does. Or you could notice that everyone else is broke and anxious and trapped and use that as fuel for yourself. You could decide you're not going to be a statistic, not going to follow the path that leads to decades of money stress. This isn't about judging other people. It's about seeing clearly where common patterns lead. And if you don't like that destination, you need different patterns. The danger zone is dangerous precisely because it's where patterns get set for the long haul. The person who stays disciplined from 20 to 50,000 will probably stay disciplined from 50 to 100 and beyond. But the person who breaks under the mental pressure in this range will probably break again at every future milestone because the pressure doesn't get easier, it just changes shape a little bit. At 100,000, you'll tell yourself, hey, I've earned this new car. At 200,000, you'll justify a bigger house. At 500,000, you'll find some other way to turn saved money into higher spending. The pattern, once set, continually repeats itself. And it usually gets set here in the danger zone when you're still figuring out what kind of person you're going to be with money. So this isn't really about $20,000 or $50,000. It's about whether you're going to be somebody who builds something or someone who almost builds something before taking themselves out of it. And I'm sorry to say, you won't get another shot at finding out. This is the real test right here, right now, in this weird psychological space where you have just enough to fool yourself. The dark truth is most people are going to fail this test. They hit 25 or 35,000 and think they've made it, then wake up at 45 with roughly the same amount and wonder where their 30s went. They never got past 50,000 because they never stopped seeing money as something to spend instead of something to deploy. And by the time they figure out their mistakes, they've lost precious years when growth could have worked magic. But there's a hopeful truth under the dark one. You're aware of the trap now. You can see it for what it is. Awareness doesn't make temptation disappear. The pull to spend, to relax, to reward yourself is still going to be there. Your brain will still create elaborate reasons why this particular purchase is different, necessary, justified even. But awareness creates a tiny gap between impulse and action. And that gap, you have a choice most people never realize they're making. You can choose to be someone who pushed through the danger zone, who felt the mental pressure, saw it clearly, and kept saving anyway. Not because you're more disciplined or better or smarter than everyone else, but because you understood that the pressure itself was a sign that you're doing something right. Anything worth doing is going to be mentally difficult at exactly the moment you're tempted to quit. It's not a bug, it's how change works. The person who never feels tempted to spend their savings probably isn't saving enough to matter. The person who feels the temptation but continues anyway is becoming someone different, someone capable of more. So if you're in the danger zone right now, sitting at 22 or 28 or 41,000 and feeling that weird mix of pride and restlessness, pay attention to what you do next. This is the moment that counts, not because of the specific dollar amount, but because of what your choice reveals about your path. You can be the person who almost built something, who got 20% of the way there before deciding it was too hard, too slow, too boring even. Most people make that choice, and it's a perfectly fine way to live, to be honest. Or you can be the person who saw the psychological trap and walked through it anyway, who understood that the uncomfortable pressure they're feeling is exactly what everyone who builds real wealth has to navigate. The difference between these paths isn't visible yet. Both people might have 30,000 today, but check back in on them in 10 years. One will have 300,000 or more. The other will have 40,000 and a nicer car and some nice memories and a growing feeling that they've missed something important. Both futures are visible in how you handle the next 12 months. In whether you recognize the danger zone for what it is and refuse to become another casualty of it. The math of compound growth is well known and well studied, but the psychology of keeping up compound behavior is the real secret. It's what separates people who build wealth from people who almost build wealth. And almost building wealth is worse than never trying at all. You've tasted the possibility, felt the momentum, saved just enough to know what might have been, then you watched yourself sabotage it in slow motion. That's the real danger of the danger zone. Not that you'll go broke, but that you'll stay stuck. Just comfortable enough not to change, just uncomfortable enough to resent where you are. There's more to this pattern. Wait until you see where this leads in the next video.